There's also a danger of going down the path of women always being passive victims, and that we should also remember that women can be, perpetrate violence and be, cruel, and we don't want to have these essentialist divisions.
Absolutely right. And I think the context from which you're coming is very much India, where the courts have been more mindful of the broader context of the woman in terms of the social and the family setting, and where there has been a propensity for abuse. But now they're recognizing that women are actually using some of these laws to get families in trouble or get their husbands in trouble. So some of the default provisions that were enacted in order to protect them are now being used exactly the other way.
Yeah, I have just India is going to change the domestic violence law because previously
they're going to what, the
domestic violence act. India is going to change because the women has been misusing it, and they have just make a provision that if there is any kind of false allegation, then you are supposed to face the similar type of provision nowadays, because the most that may be the possibility, but the extent of possibility, the how historically, or the systemic partiality, the question of within the judiciary how the systemic partiality is there, because she's saying that in most of the sexual or the women related issues, the women are blamed for the any kind of culprit or any kind of incidents. The question of rape, most of the argument whatsoever we do, if that is rigorously accepted, the question is that the consent, whether there is the medical evidences or not, or only the confession or only the statement of the woman is sufficient to amount the rape or not. But I think that we should go beyond that. If we consider, if we limit within the idea that we should rigorously follow the law, then we cannot stop the private nature of violences.
But again, I think it comes down to what examples are there of grave injustices, so that people can recognize how the law, in being applied so rigidly, might actually be doing injustice. And I think until you don't have the right case to highlight the gaps in the law, then to a certain extent the judges are bound to follow precedent. They have to go unless it gets to the highest court. So in Hong Kong, we have had several opportunities. The Kissel case was one of them, where the Court of Final Appeal had the opportunity to consider whether on all accounts everything was dealt with and decided properly. So it comes down to opportunity. And if you know about the Hong Kong context, you will know it takes a major tragedy. So we've had Tin Shui Wai with the mass murder, suicides, with broken families. It takes a major tragedy before people start to take notice and realize we are not doing everything that we can do. We could do more. And in fact, that was going to be my question to Anna, which is, you've got such valuable, albeit I know it's still halfway done, data from this particular hospital. But we also know in Hong Kong, the demographic picture for every district is so different. Yeah. Is there any scope, do you think, for collaborating with other hospitals to get a better sense of who's presenting at the A&E? Because this is really, really insightful information.
This is a very good idea. Yes, tries to approach the different hospital, but actually it's maybe sometimes not much easy, because at least the hospital, the service in charge will think that this is a good, willing to do something. But I think this is a good that too. This is start from beginning in this hospital. Maybe next step we try to approach a different emergency department to find more about, to understand the different district, what happened there. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
very
you very
good
much.
idea. I invite you to join together.
That would be, well, that's the idea really of this setting. I think there are a lot of us in the room who have valuable ideas that can sort of help inform sort of the forward-going process. And that's what I want to spend the next 40 minutes or so on, to try to gauge not only, the earlier questions that we raised in the morning, which is, what do we know about needs of victims and perpetrators, and what needs do we currently meet, and then what are the gaps that we're not meeting at the moment? What are our knowledge gaps? Do we have information about women and children in the home, or others who are vulnerable to risk? And how do we assess individuals? And how can we design services so that we have better knowledge across disciplines, and then the sharing of information, which we discussed earlier. And I think all of these say to us that there are certain implications arising out of the work you've heard about today in terms of frontline responders' roles, and as Anna said as well, what are the expertise of different services, but also what are their limitations, and how we need to be thinking about not just victims, but also perpetrators, and as Edward said, sort of the poly-victimization context that can present itself in IPV. And, what's our process? So the question Luna raised, sort of where do you go to first? And, does whoever you're going to see first know what to do with you? So how do we make interventions more responsive to the need on the ground? And I think it comes down to after we've sort of worked out those issues, then it comes down to how to make those interventions more receptive. And then, of course, all of this should feed ultimately into the government's, agenda somewhere so that they can make the necessary provisions for resource allocation, but also education and training of people in the service sector or even at the university level before they go out as professionals. So I want to open up the floor really to sort of invite submissions and discussions on that point. But maybe, perhaps, since we've had a lot of reflection, an opportunity to reflect individually, maybe I can ask you to share with your neighbor and see sort of what suggestions you might have before we share with the broader group. So maybe you get into a small group of 2 or 3 people and just reflect on some of these questions on what's the way forward, what can we do? Just the persons next to you, or in front of you, or behind you.
I just want to know, in Hong Kong, can you say that the self-defense is a reason to abuse or to hurt another one?
Only if it's life.
But this is not
easy. It's not easy. You have to show that the use of force was proportionate. Yeah. So, like she said, if you slap someone, you can't kill them. Yes. Yes.
Oh, here. This is a new bottle here.
There's a new bottle on
the next row. Yeah. No, this row. Open. Next row. Behind that. Yeah. But just only consider this incident only, not past history.
Yeah, that's the current very narrow
approach.
Yes. Which of course, as you would know, it makes no sense, right? Because like the cases we saw in England is very much the reason the one I mentioned, Alwali's, and was sleeping, and the night before he threatened her, he said, tomorrow if you do this, I will kill you. And so she's very scared, and then 20 years of violence and rape. So she put oil on him and then burned him. So the court accepted that this is also a way of self-defense. Of course, the danger is then she planned. She has the oil, she buys all those things. But what can she do? She is an immigrant. She has many difficulties, and she's completely dependent on him. And he continued to abuse her for several years. So she tried to argue I was provoked because he threatened to kill her. So it's self-defense. I had to say
to resign, to kill him. But actually, after the court process, this woman is no sentence is okay.
Yeah, well, she when she's on appeal, so she was first convicted. Then she appealed to make this argument that self-defense should be considered in light of all rape violence, not just one incident. And then, so she served 4 years already. Then, so after her appeal, she succeeded and she's free. Because
this is a very typical case can be applied in Hong Kong.
Yeah. But that's the thing. I mean, we had the opportunity with the Nancy Kissel case, but the local jury, they do not believe her, and then she also had an affair, and then the husband takes drug or maybe gay. I think the family context is too foreign for the local jury, so they have no sympathy for her, even though there is abuse, there is evidence of abuse. They know, and I don't think the barrister is right. She said there's no evidence of medical injury. There was. She had broken ribs. I'm sorry. So the evidence is there, but that time, because of the media coverage and everything, the jury do not have any sympathy for her. So her case went all the way. First time she's convicted, she appealed all the way. Then it's a misdirection to the jury. So the judge did not summarize properly for the jury to decide. then it's a retrial, start all over again. And the second round, she tried to argue this battered wife syndrome defense, and then again she's convicted. She appealed all the way, but still convicted. So you can tell that
It's a terrible process.
yeah, but for her also, unfortunately, because it's so sensationalized, by the time she had her second trial, already there are 2 books about her case and then a movie.
Superstar.
But you can imagine that the jury's mind is not it's not blank.
Yeah.
They already have
A
made
lot
up.
of information.
So they read from here, read from there. So it's not really it's
Pure.
not a fair. Yeah. It's not a fair.
Because I think it's after more than 10 years before one case is also abusive women admitted in the shelter, but at the same time arrested by the police because it's also it's a long history of abuse by her husband. But the incident is before she admitted in the admitted in the shelter, just because it's also a conflict with her husband, and but the husband always threatened or killed her or something or doing something. But so one day they have a conflict, and the woman went into the kitchen. But in the same time, the kitchen is blowing a shoe and bought a shoe. In the same time, because the woman very fear because of men just borrow her to go into the kitchen. So the women just throw the whole hot soup to the husband. So the husband has a half body, level 2 or 3 burn. Yeah. So at the end, the woman is convicted, but no need in person, should be on probation 2 years. Yeah, because it's against, we say that cannot say this is self-defense because in this incident, the man just verbally talking about it. But the women are not of fear. It's not just this incident. It's a lot of past history.
But that's the thing. There's so many psychologists. So Walker, for example, right, she say how the way you think about how can you save yourself, your strategies, they will constantly evolve over your experiences, and you're always going to be hyper vigilant. So like the woman, even though it's just verbal, she is ready because
ready to do
you
something.
don't know what's going to happen.
And also the husband just follow her.
Yeah.
When she just want to avoid him. Okay, you say something, I just leave.
But that's the thing, that the professionals, if they don't have this expertise, which they won't because they do many cases, not just this, then you can't process the evidence.
Yeah.
The evidence, your view of the evidence.
Just in this incident.
Yes.
What happened to this morning?
Which is not really the true facts.
Yes.
You see, so it's really important first is to get judges and lawyers to acknowledge that they don't have the full picture.
Right.
But you can see there's a lot of,
It's a well-known path.
Exactly. Because I don't know why there's so much hesitation. Because it's the fear, I think, of what I said earlier, that, if you take culture into the argument, then law is not law, it is culture. But that's not the point. The point is you have to make the right decision, which is just.
Yes.
You can only do that with all information. And that's all we're saying. That this is part of the whole picture. Some cultural factors, some past history. You need the whole thing.
Not just only this incident. Actually, I'm doing now to have making a study with a scholar in the U.S. She's a criminologist. Just interviewed for a number of women that offend in the prison. They were also the guilty is abused their husband or hurt their husband or something. But also she tries to advocate